In the vast labyrinth of human consciousness, there exist pathways to transcendence, hidden maps that guide the seeker through the territories of both matter and spirit. These ancient cartographic systems, encoded in landscapes and sacred sites across our world, have silently guided initiates for millennia, revealing the profound connections between outer geographies and inner realms of being. Imagine for a moment that the land beneath your feet is not merely soil and stone, but a living text, a sacred manuscript written in the language of mountains and rivers, forests and plains. What if I told you that scattered across our planet are intricate systems of knowledge, deliberately embedded within the landscape itself? Ancient civilizations didn't just build monuments to their gods. They meticulously crafted entire geographies as cosmic mirrors, terrestrial maps pointing to celestial and spiritual realities. The landscapes you walk through daily may contain hidden messages, esoteric codes that have whispered their secrets to initiates throughout the ages. From the perfectly aligned temples of Egypt to the mysterious earth figures of Glastonbury. From indigenous medicine wheels to hidden ley lines, crisscrossing continents, these are not random arrangements, but deliberate cosmic mappings designed to guide the human spirit through the territories of transformation. Today, we stand at the threshold between worlds, preparing to decode these ancient systems of sacred geography and discover how they can awaken dormant capacities within our own consciousness. The keys to these hidden maps have been preserved in plain sight, waiting for those with eyes to see and hearts prepared to understand. My fellow travelers on this journey beyond the veil, I invite you now to step outside the limited cartography of the modern mind. Our contemporary maps show us roads, political boundaries, and topographical features, but they tell us nothing of the inner dimensions those landscapes contain. The ancient wisdom keepers knew better. They understood that external geography and internal consciousness are not separate domains, but perfect reflections of one another. You who have felt that inexplicable resonance when standing in certain places, that subtle vibration that seems to connect your very being with something vaster and more profound, you have already sensed what we will explore today. That feeling is no accident, no mere poetic sentiment. It is your soul's recognition of sacred geometry encoded in the land itself. The ancients left us elaborate maps, not drawn on parchment, but embedded in stones and stars, in temple layouts and monument alignments. These maps were designed not merely to navigate physical space, but to guide the soul through its initiatory journey. They understood what modern science is only beginning to rediscover, that consciousness and matter are intertwined in ways that transcend our conventional understanding. As we embark on this exploration of esoteric cartography together, I invite you to become both the map and the territory the explorer and the landscape being explored. For in truth, the greatest mystery of sacred geography is not simply what these ancient systems reveal about the world, but what they awaken within those who learn to read them. Our expedition into the realm of esoteric cartography will take us across continents and through millennia, revealing how diverse cultures encoded spiritual wisdom within their understanding of space and place. We'll begin by exploring the origins of sacred geography in some of humanity's earliest civilizations, uncovering the principles that guided their mapping of both physical and metaphysical territories. We will then delve into the first revelations of sacred mapping systems, how Egyptian temple architects created buildings that functioned as precise models of the cosmos, their very measurements and alignments embedding mathematical and astronomical knowledge that mirrored divine order. We'll witness how Aboriginal Australians, perhaps the world's oldest continuous culture, created songlines that transformed their entire continent into a living spiritual text. Our journey will lead us deeper into the mystery of landscape zodiacs like the one at Glastonbury, where natural features and human modifications combine to create vast astrological symbols visible only from a higher perspective. We'll examine the medicine wheels of indigenous North American traditions and how they encoded sophisticated understandings of balance and wholeness within simple circular forms. Our journey will lead us deeper into the mystery of landscape zodiacs like the one at Glastonbury, where natural features and human modifications combine to create vast astrological symbols visible only from a higher perspective. We'll examine the medicine wheels of indigenous North American traditions and how they encoded sophisticated understandings of balance and wholeness within simple circular forms. Most importantly, we will translate these ancient wisdom systems into practical guidance for your own spiritual journey. You'll discover how to read the sacred geography of your local landscape, creating your own personal cartography of consciousness that bridges inner and outer worlds. Finally, we'll expand our vision to glimpse how these earthly maps connect to larger cosmic patterns, offering a transcendent perspective that reunites science and spirituality, matter and consciousness. This is not merely an intellectual exploration, but an invitation to transform how you perceive and interact with the very ground beneath your feet. By the end of our journey, you may never see your local landscape or yourself in quite the same way again. To understand the origins of esoteric cartography, we must journey back to humanity's earliest attempts to make sense of its place in the cosmos. Long before written language, our ancestors were reading the book of nature, perceiving patterns and correspondences that modern minds have largely forgotten. These ancient cartographers weren't simply mapping physical terrain. They were mapping consciousness itself, creating systems that united heaven and earth, spirit and matter. Perhaps the oldest living example of sacred geography comes from the Aboriginal peoples of Australia. For more than 40,000 years, making it the oldest continuing culture in the world, Aboriginal traditions have maintained an intricate system of dreaming tracks, or song lines, that crisscross the entire continent. According to their cosmology, in the mythic period known as the Dream Time, ancestral beings emerged from the earth and wandered across the land. Their everyday actions of birth, play, hunting, death created the landscape features we see today. These ancestral journeys became encoded in sacred narratives, songs that could be sung as one traveled, allowing navigation across vast distances through seemingly featureless terrain. What appears to outsiders as barren desert becomes, through Aboriginal eyes, a rich tapestry of stories and meanings. A landscape alive with significance. Each mountain, waterhole, and rocky outcrop is not just a physical feature, but a mnemonic device encoding spiritual knowledge. In ancient Egypt, we found another sophisticated system of sacred geography. The temples were not merely buildings dedicated to worship, but precise models of the universe at the moment of creation. Egyptian cosmology held that the universe emerged from a vast cosmic ocean of nothingness called None, with the creator sun god Atum awakening to will a small island into existence. This primordial mound became the template for Egyptian sacred architecture, with temple floors rising gradually as one moved toward the inner sanctuary, physically enacting the emergence of order from chaos. The Hindus developed their own elaborate sacred geography, identifying tirthas, crossing places between worlds, and mapping divine presence onto rivers, mountains, and entire regions. Their sacred texts described a cosmos of multiple worlds and dimensions, with certain earthly locations serving as access points to these higher realms. What unites these diverse traditions is a fundamental understanding that physical geography can function as a vessel for spiritual truth, that the material world, properly perceived and engaged, reveals pathways to transcendent knowledge. These ancient cartographers understood something modern science is only beginning to rediscover, that consciousness and matter, inner and outer reality, are not separate domains, but aspects of a unified whole. The wisdom of these traditions wasn't preserved in books alone, but encoded in monuments aligned with celestial bodies, in landscape features modified to reflect cosmic patterns, and in oral traditions that transformed walking itself into a spiritual practice. They created maps that could be read not just with the intellect, but experienced with the entire being. Maps designed to guide the soul on its journey through both physical existence and spiritual becoming. The first profound revelation of esoteric cartography is that temples and sacred sites were designed as precise microcosm physical models that perfectly mirrored macrocosmic realities. This principle of as above, so below guided master builders across cultures to create structures that functioned as both astronomical observatories and spiritual technologies. In Egypt, this understanding reached extraordinary sophistication. Egyptian temples weren't simply impressive buildings. They were functioning models of creation itself. Their architectural layout embodied a journey from the outer world of multiplicity toward the inner sanctum of divine unity. As one moved deeper into the temple complex, floor levels gradually rose while ceilings became lower, creating increasingly intimate spaces that culminated in the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. This sanctuary represented the primeval hill from which all creation emerged, while the outer court symbolized the waters of chaos that surrounded the ordered world. The journey through the temple thus reenacted the emergence of cosmos from chaos, of light from darkness. Only priests and pharaoh could enter the innermost sanctuary, where a single shaft of light might illuminate the god statue, a controlled revelation mirroring cosmic birth. The hypostyle halls with their massive columns represented primordial forests or reed thickets surrounding the first land. Every architectural element carried symbolic significance, creating a complete cosmogram, a map not just of physical reality, but of metaphysical truth. The Temple of Kam Ombo went further still, featuring two parallel axes running the length of the building, creating twin sanctuaries that honored dual aspects of divinity. Similar principles guided sacred architecture across traditions. In each case, these structures weren't merely symbolic representations, but functioning technologies designed to align human consciousness with cosmic principles. By walking the prescribed paths through these sacred spaces, initiates physically enacted spiritual transformations, their bodies becoming vessels for metaphysical journeys. This brings us to our first profound insight. Sacred spaces were designed not merely for worship, but for transformation. Through careful alignment with celestial bodies, through precise geometric relationships, through symbolic correspondences encoded in architecture, these sites became machines for consciousness technologies of transcendence. The builders of these sacred maps understood that human perception is deeply influenced by the physical environment. By creating spaces that embodied cosmic principles, they developed environments that could shift consciousness into alignment with those same principles. The outer journey through the temple mirrored an inner journey through levels of awareness, culminating in direct experience of the divine. This revelation challenges our modern separation of spirituality from physical reality. In the ancient understanding, matter itself could be shaped to serve as a vessel for spirit. Physical space, properly configured, could catalyze spiritual awakening. These master builders were not merely architects, but consciousness engineers, using stone and space to create transformative environments. And perhaps most remarkably, these principles weren't limited to individual structures, but extended to entire landscapes. Sacred sites were often positioned in relationship to one another, creating larger patterns visible only from a higher perspective, or through the trained awareness of an initiate who understood the subtle, energetic relationships between seemingly separate locations. Beyond the individual sacred site lies a deeper mystery: the arrangement of multiple sites across the landscape to form vast patterns of spiritual significance. This level of esoteric cartography transforms entire regions into sacred mandalas, cosmic diagrams that can only be fully perceived from above or through the initiated imagination. Perhaps the most extraordinary example is the Glastonbury Zodiac in England. Around the town of Glastonbury, natural landscape features combine with ancient earthworks to create a vast circle containing the 12 signs of the zodiac. These gigantic figures, some 5 miles across, are formed by hills, contours, roads, paths, field boundaries, and waterways. The entire complex measures some 10 to 12 miles across, creating a terrestrial mirror of the celestial zodiac. This remarkable configuration was only rediscovered in 1927 by Catherine Maltwood, who found that when she scaled astrological charts to maps of the region, the stars of the zodiac fit perfectly over the earthly effigies. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is that these formations appear to be partly natural, the underlying geography itself seeming to manifest these symbolic forms. A similar phenomenon appears in the mysterious ley lines that some believe criss-cross the landscape, connecting ancient sites along straight alignments. While mainstream archaeology considers ley lines pseudo-science, these straight-line connections between prehistoric structures, monuments, and natural features have fascinated researchers since Alfred Watkins first identified them in the 1920s. Some esoteric traditions view these lines as channels of earth energy, invisible currents that ancient peoples could perceive and harness. Indigenous traditions offer their own profound mapping systems. The medicine wheel of North American traditions represents far more than the 4 cardinal directions. This powerful symbol embodies the cyclical nature of life, the harmony of opposing forces, and a sophisticated framework for maintaining balance in physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental dimensions. Archaeological evidence of medicine wheels dates back to around 4000 BCE, with notable examples like the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming potentially serving astronomical purposes. What unites these diverse mapping systems is their multidimensional nature. They function simultaneously on physical, energetic, and symbolic levels. A mountain might be both a geographic feature and the embodied presence of a deity. A river, both a waterway and a current of spiritual energy. A stone circle, both an astronomical calculator and a portal between worlds. This multidimensional understanding reveals perhaps the deepest mystery of esoteric cartography. These systems don't merely represent spiritual realities. They actively participate in them. The map and territory become one. The physical landscape doesn't just symbolize the cosmos. It embodies cosmic principles, making them accessible to human experience. This perspective challenges our modern separation between symbol and reality, between representation and presence. In sacred geography, the symbolic and the real aren't separated by an unbridgeable gulf, they interpenetrate, each revealing aspects of the other. The physical landscape becomes a text that can be read with trained perception, while spiritual realities become tangibly present through their earthly correspondences. Modern physics offers intriguing parallels to this ancient understanding. The observer effect in quantum mechanics, the strange entanglements between particles, the emerging understanding that information may be as fundamental as matter or energy, all point toward a universe where consciousness and physical reality are inextricably linked, where the act of perception helps shape what is perceived. How might we integrate these ancient mapping systems into our modern lives? How can esoteric cartography become not just a fascinating historical study, but a living practice that enriches our spiritual journey? The answer lies in developing what we might call sacred seeing, a way of perceiving and engaging with our local landscapes that reveals their hidden dimensions. Begin by choosing a place in your local environment that naturally draws you to a park, a hilltop, a body of water, an old tree. This will become your anchor point, your personal axis mundi connecting heaven and earth. Visit this place regularly, in different weather conditions, at different times of day, through changing seasons. Don't merely observe it visually. Engage all your senses. Feel the textures. Listen to the sounds. Notice the scents. Allow yourself to be fully present, gradually building a multidimensional relationship with this location. As your connection deepens, begin to notice how this place relates to the wider landscape. What can be seen from here? What natural features or human structures align with your position? Are there sight lines to sunrise or unset at significant times of year? Even in urban environments, you can discover remarkable alignments and relationships between buildings, streets, and any remaining natural features. Consider creating your own spiritual mapping exercise. Begin by identifying 4 questions. What are the major questions you're asking in this season of your life? What core truths are you clinging to? Where are you standing right now in your spiritual journey? And where is the divine in relation to where you stand? Your answers create a personal cartography of consciousness, mapping your current spiritual position and possible directions for growth. For deeper practice, explore the 4 directions as understood in indigenous traditions. The medicine wheel teaches us that each direction carries specific energies, qualities, and lessons. In many traditions, East represents new beginnings, illumination, clarity. South embodies growth, passion, relationship. West brings introspection, emotional depth, wisdom. And North offers structure, wisdom, completion. By orienting yourself to these directions in your chosen place, you create a personal medicine wheel, a sacred circle that helps maintain balance in all dimensions of your life. Advanced practitioners might work with the concept of ley lines in their local area. While remaining respectful of scientific perspectives, you can explore whether certain pathways or alignments between significant sites create a sense of heightened energy or awareness. Walking these lines with mindful attention can become a form of moving meditation, a pilgrimage in miniature. Perhaps most importantly, this practice helps heal the modern split between spirituality and place. Many of us feel disconnected from the land where we live, treating it as mere backdrop to our activities rather than as a living presence with which we're in relationship. Sacred geography teaches us to see our local landscapes as partners in our spiritual journey, filled with meaning and possibility. This doesn't require believing that landscape features are literally conscious, though many traditions would affirm this. It requires only that we approach the land with reverence and attention, recognizing that our ancestors encoded wisdom in their relationship with place that we can still access today. By developing this relationship, we begin to feel at home in the world in a deeper sense, reconnecting with both the land beneath our feet and the wisdom traditions that have sustained humanity for millennia. As we expand our awareness of sacred geography, a transcendent perspective begins to emerge, one that unites science and spirituality, ancient wisdom and modern discovery, personal practice and universal patterns. This perspective reveals that esoteric cartography isn't merely about mapping external landscapes, but about charting the territories of consciousness itself. David K.M. Smith, a contemporary esoteric cartographer, describes his work as a type of sacred image unaffiliated with either organized religion or secular culture. For Smith, cartography becomes a form of prayer, both in its creation and its viewing. The cartographer gives their entire life over to the process, becoming an open channel for the sublime mystery at the heart of all things. This points to a profound truth. The ultimate purpose of esoteric mapping is not merely to represent reality, but to transform perception. These systems are technologies for shifting awareness, tools for awakening dormant capacities of consciousness. When we engage deeply with sacred geography, we're not just learning about ancient beliefs. We're activating modes of perception that modern culture has largely forgotten. Consider how esoteric cartography differs from conventional mapping. Modern maps aim for objective accuracy, stripping away subjective experience to create standardized representations. Sacred maps, by contrast, include dimensions of meaning, feeling, and spiritual significance. They map not just physical features, but energetic currents, symbolic resonances, mythic narratives, and the full spectrum of human experience. This multidimensional mapping extends beyond physical landscapes. The tarot deck, for instance, functions as an occult cartographic device to map, organize, and unify various Western esoteric knowledge practices. It creates a symbolic territory that can be navigated for self-discovery and transformation. Similarly, mandalas in Buddhist and Hindu traditions map the cosmos in symbolic form, creating sacred spaces that can be entered through meditation. What unites these diverse mapping systems is their understanding that consciousness and landscape, inner and outer reality, are not separate domains, but aspects of a unified whole. The patterns we perceive in the external world reflect patterns within our own awareness. By learning to read the book of nature, we simultaneously learn to read the book of our own consciousness. This perspective offers profound implications for our contemporary world. In an age of ecological crisis, sacred geography reminds us that we are not separate from the landscapes we inhabit, but intimately connected with them. In an era of digital distraction, it calls us back to direct engagement with the physical world, to walking practices that reconnect body, mind, and spirit. In a time of fragmentation and specialization, it offers integrative wisdom that bridges disciplines and traditions. Perhaps most importantly, esoteric cartography reminds us that reality is vaster and more mysterious than our conventional maps suggest. Beyond the flatland of materialist understanding lies a multidimensional cosmos alive with meaning and purpose. By learning to navigate these hidden dimensions, we expand our sense of what's possible, both for ourselves and for our world. The transcendent perspective doesn't require abandoning reason or embracing superstition. It invites us to develop more comprehensive ways of knowing that include, but transcend, rational understanding ways that integrate sensory perception, emotional intelligence, symbolic thinking, and direct intuitive apprehension. The result is not less clarity, but more a stereoscopic vision that perceives both the physical world and its metaphysical dimensions. As our exploration of esoteric cartography draws to a close, we stand at a threshold of possibility. Before us lies an invitation to become not just students of sacred geography, but active participants in its ongoing creation. For these ancient mapping systems were never meant to be static artifacts, but living traditions, continuously renewed through practice and direct experience. The wisdom encoded in temple alignments, landscape zodiacs, medicine wheels, and songlines wasn't preserved merely for scholarly interest. It was preserved to be embodied, to be walked, to be sung, to be lived. These systems offer pathways of return, not regression to the past, but reconnection with perennial wisdom that our modern world desperately needs. I invite you now to step beyond the confines of conventional cartography into a wider world of meaning and possibility. Begin to see the landscape around you not merely as scenery or resource, but as text to be read, as a presence to be encountered, as a partner in your spiritual journey. The land where you live, however ordinary it might seem, contains hidden dimensions waiting to be discovered through reverent attention and embodied practice. Start simply by walking mindfully in your local environment, by sitting quietly in natural settings, by observing the movement of celestial bodies across your particular horizon. Notice the feeling states that arise in different locations. Pay attention to your dreams after spending time in significant places. Begin to map your inner responses to outer environments, creating your personal, sacred geography. As your practice deepens, you might find yourself drawn to create your own mapping systems journals that track your experiences in particular places, artwork that captures the genius loci or spirit of a location, rituals that honor the unique qualities of your local landscape. This creative engagement continues the ancient tradition of esoteric cartography, adapting it for our contemporary world. Remember that you're not alone in this exploration. Across cultures and throughout time, wisdom keepers have maintained these traditions, preserving them during periods of forgetting, revitalizing them for new generations. You stand in a long lineage of those who have sought to read the book of nature, to discover the correspondences between macrocosm and microcosm, to map the territories where spirit and matter meet. The greatest mystery of esoteric cartography may be this: the map you seek is also seeking you. The landscape isn't passive, but alive with intelligence and purpose. When you approach it with reverence and openness, it responds, revealing dimensions of itself that remain hidden to casual observation or exploitative intent. In the words attributed to the Hermetic tradition, as above, so below, as within, so without. The patterns of the cosmos are reflected in the earth beneath our feet, and both are mirrored within our own consciousness. By learning to read these correspondences, we discover that we are not strangers in an alien universe, but integral participants in a living whole, precisely positioned to serve as conscious bridges between heaven and earth. I leave you with this final thought. The most important map is the one you create through living fully in a sacred relationship with your world. Your footsteps write a text upon the earth. Your attention weaves connections between seen and unseen dimensions. Your reverence awakens ancient knowledge that has never truly been forgotten, only temporarily obscured. The journey of esoteric cartography ultimately leads not outward, but inward to the center point, where self and world, spirit and matter, human and divine, reveal themselves as aspects of a single, sacred reality. The map awaits. The territory calls. The journey continues.